Hey guys, my name is Abdul Baig and thank you for your interest in my research today. So aptitude tests are a commonly used tool used to measure people's potential, right? For example, an aptitude test I'm sure we're all familiar with is the SAT, which is still used in most college admissions recruiting to this day. In recent years, admission and hiring boards have actually begun to abandon the idea of using behavioral aptitude tests to measure one's potential. This is because behavioral aptitude tests pose some big problems. For one, they tend to exclude possibly relevant parameters by which their measure could be made more accurate for finding aptitude. Another reason is because these types of measures on aptitude tests can be influenced by systematic biases related to previous experiences and access to resources. The current study explored a potential solution to the challenge of performance-based or behavioral aptitude tests, and this approach is called the resting state. It's a task-free neuropsychometric approach that aims to either supplement or replace our current behavioral measures of aptitude. The resting state approach takes neural frequencies of the brain at rest via electroencephalograms and assesses the differences between individuals' neural frequencies. But in order to determine one's aptitude by looking at neural frequencies of the brain at rest, logically there must be a sort of detailed map of the function of each frequency of the brain at rest, right? The problem is that there is no such detailed map. This is because work done using this approach to predict aptitude is relatively unexplored, so there's a gap in knowledge by which the offline or resting state neural indices of EEG predict task performance. The current study focused on the unexplored territory of beta power, and this is because research done in a 2016 language study provided among the first pieces of evidence that higher proportion of electrical activity, also known as power, and the beta frequency band at rest correlated with the rate by which an individual learned a second language. So in an attempt to determine the aptitude of learning a second language simply by looking at the brain at rest, we have to be able to discover the function of beta in the brain at rest. What we really want to know is what the neural mechanism is for resting state beta power that drives the individual differences in learning a second language faster. And based on the most established roles of beta in the literature online, we hypothesize that the observed relation is driven either by individual differences in motor control or cognitive control more generally. To test this hypothesis, we took a measure for each mechanism, indexed by the Simon and stop signal reaction time task and random mediation analysis. The Simon task is a cognitive behavioral interference task, which we use to measure general cognitive control, and the SSRT task is a motor response interference task, which we use to measure motor control. By using these mechanisms as mediators and running a mediation analysis, we are basically statistically determining how much of the relation between beta power offline and second language learning rate is driven or explained by the brain's cognitive and motor control capabilities. What we found was that the two tasks did not mediate the relation between beta power and second language learning rate. But we also found that higher power in the low beta band offline was significantly positively correlated with rate in learning a second language. Where this study differs from the 2016 language study is that the results also suggest that higher power in the high beta band during a resting state is also correlated with second language learning rate. And we found this because we used a different cleaning method to clean the data. At face value, these results mean that the mechanisms of motor control and cognitive control do not explain the relation, but this conclusion would be naive to jump to immediately given the small sample size of our study, that being n equals 38. Also, it's pretty possible that there are better indices of motor control and cognitive control aside from our Simon and SSRT tests that we used. So a future study would want to use multiple indices of motor and cognitive control to determine a factor that is more general than performance on a specific task. Ultimately, the goal is to connect the dots between these concepts, which will allow us to not only determine the aptitude of learning a second language, but also inform our understanding of the nature of learning a complex skill more generally. In conclusion, our results demonstrate that the role of beta power online is not the same as the role of beta power offline. More specifically, this means that one's motor control and cognitive control capabilities cannot be used to predict one's aptitude in learning a second language, but more generally, this suggests that there's a distinction between online and offline neural indices. Thank you so much for listening to my talk, and please contact me if you have any further questions.